So how long before we're all flying on Chinese aircraft? We've talked about this many times before. There are two major aircraft manufacturers in the world, the American Boeing and the European Airbus. And they are the very definition of a duopoly. As combined, they manufacture about 90% of global commercial aircraft. There are other manufacturers, but the next flight that you get on is almost guaranteed to be either Airbus or Boeing. However, that might be set to change as Commercial Aviation Corporation of China, or COMAC, continues to try and break into this market. Let's do the quick history. We know that Boeing and Airbus are part of commercial aviation DNA, but back in 2008, the Chinese government saw its opportunity to disrupt this market and set up COMAC with a clear mandate to produce made in China commercial aircraft. And by 2016, the ARJ21, a 90-seat twin-engine medium-range aircraft, was up in the air. Fast forward to May 2023 to the launch of COMAC's second aircraft, the twin-engine narrow-body C919, designed specifically to compete with the Airbus A320 and Boeing 737 families, the mainstay of low-cost carriers across the world. The first commercial flight was operated by China Eastern Airways last year, and there are now 6 C919s in operation, flying between Shanghai and Chengdu, Shanghai and Beijing, and Shanghai and Xan. And if you want to see the in-flight experience, I've linked to Josh Cahill's excellent first-hand video. So the new aircraft looks really good and demand is already very strong, with a reported book of over 1,000 orders. So the answer is simple. We'll all be flying on these aircraft very, very soon. Well, not really. And there are several reasons for this. Here's just 3. 1, and right at the top, is the issue of scale. As we said, there are only 6 of these aircraft in operation, and all of which are operated by China Eastern. So unless you live in Shanghai, Beijing, Chengdu or Xan, you are unlikely to get anywhere near a C919 anytime soon. Now this will obviously improve over time, but even with an order book of over 1,000, these are all for either Chinese airlines or Chinese leasing companies. So again, unless you're flying in and around China, it's very unlikely you will see one of these aircraft. Which leads us to point 2, production capacity. COMAC understands the demand for these aircraft and is ramping up production as quickly as it can, and has a target of 150 aircraft by 2030. But here's where we run into the issue, and it's not COMAC's ability to produce these aircraft, but the access to parts. And we need a little bit of context here. The C919 is a Chinese airframe and is manufactured in Shanghai, but lots of the constituent parts which go into that aircraft are not Chinese and are manufactured elsewhere. 3/5 of the suppliers are US based and 1/3 from Europe. Only 14 of the 80 suppliers are Chinese, of which 7 are joint ventures between Chinese companies and foreign suppliers. The landing system and aircraft management system are French. The engines, well, they're the same as on the Airbus A320 neo, and the flight system is by Honeywell. Now what's important here is not really where the parts come from. What's important is that COMAC will be competing for those parts against the established players of Boeing and Airbus. And as we have discussed many times, COVID decimated these supply chains and manufacturers are working really hard to catch back up, and the introduction of COMAC will put further pressure on the demand for those parts. Yes, China might be able to ramp up its production capacity, but without the access to parts, it's likely to be at least into the medium term before COMAC can produce at scale. That said, it would be very naive to think that China, the world's manufacturing workshop and producer of everything, cannot find a way to address this challenge and start that scale production. And number 3, aircraft certification. And this is a big one. Again, a little bit of context. If you have $1 billion to spare and want to go and build an aircraft in your garage, you're free to do so. But before that aircraft can fly, it has to obtain its airworthiness certificate. And that's not just in the country of manufacture, but anywhere where that aircraft will operate. And the C919 is currently certified by the CAAC in China, but it doesn't have the approval from key external agencies such as the FAA in America or the EASA in Europe. And getting these approvals is not a quick exercise. It requires extensive cooperation between the OEM, the operator, and all the various approving agencies. And obviously politics will play a key part. If you want to understand just how complex this process is, I've linked to the simple flying video which goes through the process step by step. In addition, there's no set time frame for this assessment, so we don't know how long approvals will take. However, there are some things that we do know. Firstly, the Chinese press is reporting that initial discussions are taking place with the EASA. Secondly, as we said, politics is going to play a major role in this process. And thirdly, until these certifications are in place, Chinese aircraft will not be operating in these international markets. But again, context is everything. FAA and EASA approval isn't a prerequisite to COMAC being successful. On a standalone basis, the Chinese domestic market alone is one of the largest aviation markets in the world. So just by having CAAC approval, COMAC has a gigantic market to run at. So, as we can see, the answer to whether we'll be flying on Chinese aircraft very much depends on where you live. If you're in Shanghai, Chengdu, Beijing, Xi'an, go and book your ticket today. If you are in America or Europe, you're not flying on one of these for a very, very long time. But if you live in mainland China or in an Asian country with friendly relations with China, you could be on the C919 or any of the range of aircraft that COMAC is now working on much sooner than you think.